The woman pounding on my door at 6 a.m. definitely wasn't here to sell Girl Scout cookies. She had her phone in hand, 911 already dialed, and was yelling that my wife was a criminal trespasser for moving into our own house. I'm standing there in my bathrobe, coffee steaming in the cold morning air, staring at this red-faced lunatic who's literally shaking with rage because my wife dared to park her Honda in our driveway overnight. This was the HOA president, let's call her Brenda, demanding that police arrest Elena for the crime of living where she belongs. Her shrill voice echoed off the frost-covered sidewalk as neighbors peeked from behind their curtains, curious about the early morning chaos. The thing about neighborhood bullies is they eventually pick the wrong target, and 20 minutes after Brenda made that 911 call, she'd be holding very different papers with her name on them, eviction papers. So here's the question. What would you do if your HOA president tried to evict your wife from your own property? Drop a comment telling me where you're watching from, and if your neighborhood has one of these people. Let me rewind so you understand how we reached this ridiculous moment. My name's Marcus. I'm 45, work as an industrial maintenance supervisor, the kind of guy who pays his bills early, keeps his lawn trimmed like a golf course, and minds his own business. 3 years ago, I bought this house in Willowbrook Commons for $295K. A decent middle-class neighborhood with an HOA charging $180 a month for landscaping and pool upkeep. Nothing fancy, but clean and peaceful. 6 months ago, I married Elena, a 38-year-old pediatric ICU nurse who spends her life saving kids. This past weekend was her official move-in day. Saturday morning, she was unloading boxes from her Honda Civic when trouble showed up wearing a pantsuit and clutching a clipboard. Enter Brenda Kensington, 58 years old, HOA president for 4 years running, the kind of person who literally measures grass height with a ruler. Retired from the county assessor's office with too much time and not enough purpose, she lives in the biggest corner house with flower beds so perfect they look fake. 20 minutes after Elena parked her car, Brenda was marching over like she'd been called to a 5-alarm fire. "Excuse me," she announced, pen poised like a weapon. "We have overnight parking violations here." She glared at Elena's Honda like it was a broken-down drug van. "Multiple vehicles per household require board approval, and that commercial equipment violates residential-only bylaws." Commercial equipment. It was Elena's medical bag stethoscope and blood pressure cuff, visible through the rear window, the tools she uses to keep children breathing at the hospital. But Brenda was already scribbling a $150 fine, her manicured nails tapping the clipboard like tiny hammers. I stepped outside with our marriage certificate and property deed, both clearly showing Elena's name alongside mine. "She's my wife, Brenda. She lives here now." The air smelled of fresh mulch from Brenda's obsessively maintained garden as I tried to stay calm. She barely glanced at the documents. "Doesn't matter. Rules are rules." With the smugness of someone claiming a tiny victory, she slapped the fine on Elena's windshield. "Some people think rules don't apply to them," she muttered. That's when I saw Elena's expression, hurt, confused, like she'd been struck. This woman was treating my wife like a criminal for simply existing in her own home. Elena stood holding a box of nursing textbooks, still wearing her hospital ID badge from the day before, when she'd been saving premature babies. And here was this clipboard-wielding tyrant making her feel unwelcome in her own driveway. But Brenda wasn't finished. "I'll be filing a formal complaint with county code enforcement about this boarding house situation," she announced, making sure the neighbors could hear. "And I'm very concerned about this suspicious medical equipment." Medical equipment? Like Elena was running a meth lab instead of carrying the tools that restart children's hearts. Her heels clicked sharply against the concrete as she retreated to her fortress, leaving Elena standing there, clutching her box, wishing she could vanish. 3 neighbors were still watching from their windows, but their curtains snapped shut the moment I looked their way. That evening, Elena sat at our kitchen table, still in scrubs after a 12-hour ICU shift. "Maybe we should just pay the fine," she said softly, exhaustion in her voice. "I don't want to cause problems." This incredible woman, who fights death daily to save other people's children, was worried about causing trouble because some Drunk retiree decided she didn't belong here. I reached across the table, taking her hand. Her fingers still smelled faintly of hospital antiseptic, the scent of someone who spends her life healing. We're not paying that fine, I told her, and we're definitely not letting her run us out of our own home. That night, lying in bed with the distant hum of traffic outside, I made a decision. Brenda Kensington had just picked a fight with the wrong family. 3 days later, I was sipping coffee when there was a knock at the door. Not Brenda this time. A man in a county uniform stood there, holding an official clipboard, its metal edge catching the morning light. Code enforcement. The man at the door says, looking slightly embarrassed. Got a complaint about illegal boarding house operations at this address. I step aside and invite him in, giving him the grand tour of our perfectly ordinary home. 2 bedrooms, 1 couple, 0 boarders. He takes notes, asks a few questions, and then shakes his head. Someone claimed you're running an unlicensed medical facility. He explains, glancing at Elena's small work bag by the door, the familiar hospital antiseptic smell still clinging to the leather. That's your wife's nursing gear, right? I nod. He exhales heavily. Whoever filed this wasted everyone's time. You folks have a nice day. But Brenda was only warming up. That afternoon, Elena came home from work looking like she'd been gut-punched. Someone called the hospital, she said quietly. They claimed I was using hospital equipment for unauthorized purposes and questioned my professional conduct. Thankfully, her supervisors knew better. Elena's one of their best nurses, but the fact that someone tried to sabotage her career made my hands tremble with rage. Then came the anonymous notes. Tuesday morning, a folded paper under our windshield wiper. Keep our neighborhood family friendly. Wednesday, another tucked into our mailbox. Some people don't belong here. The blocky ransom-style letters didn't fool me. I recognized the expensive cream stationery from Brenda's official HOA memos. Thursday was the breaking point. Elena walked out to her car and froze. A deep, jagged scratch ran down the passenger side, the bare metal glinting through the blue paint like an angry scar. She stared at it, shoulders slumping, all the fight draining from her. Something inside me snapped. That night, I did what I should have done from day one. I sat down at the kitchen table with a highlighter and read our HOA bylaws. All 47 pages of dense, numbing legalese. My dad always told me, son, when someone's playing games with the rules, learn the rules better than they do. He was right, and the deeper I read, the more I realized Brenda had been breaking the very rules she used to target us. First violation, her fence, bylaws cap fence height at 6 feet, Brenda's backyard fence, 6 feet, 8 inches, I measured it myself, cold metal tape in hand, the way she'd taught me. Second, her prized deck edition. No permit on file, yet improvements over $5,000 require board approval. That deck, easy $15,000 in composite materials alone. And here's the beautiful part. Something I remembered from a property law class years ago. HOA enforcement must be consistent and equitable. They can't target some residents while ignoring violations by others. It's written in black and white, probably by a lawyer who'd seen exactly how petty tyrants operate. The same rules they hide behind can be used to stop them, if you know how. Friday morning, I filed formal complaints against Brenda with the HOA board. I attached photos of her fence, proof of the unpermitted deck, and a timeline of her harassment campaign against Elena. I cited the consistent enforcement clause and requested an emergency board meeting. By Monday evening, we were sitting in the community center under buzzing fluorescent lights. Brenda arrived with her usual 3 supporters, expecting to bulldoze some motion against us. Instead, she walked into a room where I sat calm and collected, a folder of evidence in front of me, and a smile I'm sure looked a little too confident. Before we discuss any alleged violations involving my family, I began when the meeting opened. I'd like to address some actual violations that require immediate attention. I slid copies of my evidence across the table to each board member. The papers made a crisp whisper against the faux wood surface. As you can see, we've got a serious consistency problem in enforcement. Brenda's face cycled through several shades as the board reviewed the photos. This is ridiculous, she snapped. Marcus is just trying to deflect from his own violations with frivolous complaints. Are you saying the tape measure is lying? I asked evenly. Or that the county permits office is wrong about your deck addition? The room fell silent. One of those thick, awkward silences when everyone realizes the HOA president has been caught red-handed. The other board members, reasonable folks who just wanted the neighborhood to run smoothly, began asking Brenda pointed questions about when she planned to fix her own violations. By now her face was the color of a ripe tomato. "This meeting is over," she declared, snatching up her papers and heading for the door. "Actually," I called after her, "by the bylaws, meetings can only be adjourned by majority vote." She froze in the doorway, every muscle tense, then stormed into the parking lot, slamming her car door hard enough to rattle the community center windows. If I thought humiliating Brenda in front of the board would make her back off, I had seriously underestimated the wrath of a woman who just lost face in front of her neighbors. The next morning, on my way to work, I spot an unfamiliar car parked across the street. A guy in a cheap suit behind the wheel, a camera in his hands. Morning sunlight flashes off his telephoto lens like the unblinking eye of a predator. At lunch, Elena calls, her voice tight. "There's someone taking pictures of our house," she whispers. I saw him through the bedroom window when I got home. My coffee suddenly tastes bitter. Brenda had hired a private investigator, probably hoping to dig up some scandal to justify her crusade. The irony is delicious. She's paying someone to prove we're criminals while she's the one breaking HOA rules. But Brenda's escalation continues. Wednesday, Elena's supervisor calls her in. The humming fluorescent lights make the air feel tense. Someone filed a formal complaint claiming Elena was mentally unstable and involved in neighborhood disputes that affect her judgment. The supervisor, who's worked with her for 3 years, actually laughs. "Whoever wrote this doesn't know you, but I have to file it with HR." That night, lavender lotion scents the bedroom as Elena sits on the bed, shoulders hunched. "Maybe we should move," she murmurs. "I can't handle someone trying to wreck my career over parking spaces." That's when I see the real plan. Brenda isn't just harassing us, she's trying to drive us out. Thursday, the city planning office shows up another anonymous complaint, claiming we're running a medical practice from home. The inspector glances at Elena's work bag and shakes his head. "Unless you're performing surgery in your living room, carrying medical gear home isn't a violation." That evening, I call a property attorney, Sarah Martinez, whose voice carries the weariness of someone who's seen this exact HOA nightmare before. Selective, harassing enforcement creates legal liability for the HOA, she explains. It's like workplace harassment laws just applied to housing. She advises recording everything, timestamps, witnesses, something Elena's nursing background already made her good at. Then Sarah drops the real bomb, requests 3 years of HOA financial records. Brenda can't legally refuse, and in my experience, people like her usually have something to hide. Friday morning, I submit the request. The board must have overruled her objections because Brenda calls an emergency meeting to discuss protecting sensitive HOA information. The sudden panic over public records smells worse than cold salmon. Meanwhile, her PI surveillance gets sloppy, following Elena to the grocery store, idling outside the hospital. By Thursday, Elena's had enough. She walks up to his car, knocks on the window, and asks if he'd like her autograph. His face flushes crimson before he drives off. Brenda's neighborhood watch meeting pulls in exactly 4 people, herself included. My neighbor Tom Martinez, a retired accountant with sharp eyes, later tells me she spent more time ranting about Elena's car than actual security. Then Brenda makes her biggest blunder. Friday night, she emails the whole neighborhood announcing an $800 emergency assessment for enhanced security, thinly veiled as protection against disruptive elements. Payment due in 30 days or face liens. The phone rings all night. Neighbors who'd kept quiet are suddenly furious. Nobody likes surprise bills, especially ones that reek of retaliation. Brenda had just made the everyone's problem. Saturday morning, she's on my doorstep at 6 a.m., phone in hand, the 111 screen ready like she's about to launch a missile. There's an illegal trespasser in this house. She shouts, breath puffing in the cold air. She points at Elena, standing in scrubs, ID badge visible, still smelling faintly of hospital coffee. Brenda, this is my wife, I say, showing the marriage certificate indeed. But reasoning with her now is like convincing a tornado to change course. I don't care what fake papers you have. No one moves in without HOA approval, and I never approved this person. She snaps, dripping venom. Officer Rodriguez arrives, probably expecting a domestic violence call, and finds 3 adults in a driveway arguing about residency. I hand him our documents. His expression shifts from alert to annoyed. Ma'am, he tells Brenda, this is a civil matter. They have every right to be here. She demands Elena's arrest anyway, her voice climbing into nails. On a chalkboard territory until half the neighborhood comes out to watch. Rodriguez warns her, file another false report and you could face charges. But she's too far gone to hear. That weekend, Elena and I dive into the HOA records Brenda was forced to release. We spread them across the table like a crime scene. Buried in the expense reports we find it. Every landscaping contract for 2 years went to Kensington Gardens LLC, a company sharing Brenda's last name and listing her husband as agent. $47,000 in emergency landscaping services that we never received. My uncle's voice echoes in my head from years ago. Follow the money, nephew. When someone clings to power like their life depends on it, they're usually guarding their wallet. In Brenda's case, the paper trail was glaring. No competitive bidding, no board approval for contracts over $50,000 in direct violation of HOA bylaws, no business license, no insurance. Just Brenda writing community checks to her family's landscaping company for work that was either never done or grotesquely overpriced. The math wasn't hard. Each household had been overcharged about $400 a year, money quietly feeding Brenda's personal business. But Elena spotted something even more damning. The biggest payouts lined up perfectly with Brenda's nastiest enforcement streaks. Every time someone challenged her authority, an emergency landscaping bill popped up within weeks. It wasn't just theft, it was retaliation, paid for by the very people she targeted. Sunday evening, I called Attorney Martinez. You're going to want to see this, I told her, staring at the spread of documents like evidence from a high-profile criminal case. And maybe clear your calendar. Elena's hand found my shoulder, carrying the faint scent of hospital antiseptic. A reminder she'd been saving lives while Brenda was stealing money. What happens now? She asked. And now, I said, we show the neighborhood exactly who they've been paying to protect them. By Monday morning, I was in Martinez's office, watching her examine our evidence with the precision of a surgeon reading X-rays. The smell of leather, bound law books mixed with fresh coffee as she spread the papers across her mahogany desk, scribbling notes like she was mapping buried treasure. This is textbook self-dealing, she said at last, leaning back with a low whistle. But it's worse than I thought. She pulled a red folder from a cabinet and shut the metal drawer with a click. Most board members hide their corruption. Brenda's been stealing in broad daylight. Martinez walked me through the legal stakes, and my mind flashed back to my old business law professor explaining fiduciary duty, how corporate directors must act in the best interest of those they represent. In an HOA, that means no secret deals, no undisclosed family contracts, and no spending above $50,000 without board approval. Brenda had violated every rule. $47,000 went to her husband's company without a single vote. That wasn't a mistake, it was theft. The real kicker was the pattern Elena spotted. The biggest checks to Kensington Gardens LLC matched the month's residents stood up to Brenda. March complaint, $80,000 emergency, tree removal in April. August challenge to a fine, $12,000 sprinkler repair in September paid to the same people. She's been using community money to fund her revenge, Martinez said, her voice sharp with the kind of outrage you hear from someone who's seen too many petty tyrants in action. The consequences were huge. Criminal charges for theft, fraud, breach of fiduciary duty. The HOA insurance wouldn't cover criminal acts, meaning Brenda could be personally on the hook for every cent, plus interest, penalties, and legal fees. And thanks to her harassment of Elena, she now faced potential charges for witness intimidation and filing false reports. Martinez's conservative estimate, $31,000 stolen, $15,000 in interest and penalties, and $50,000 minimum once damages were added. Her $380,000 house could easily be liened and sold to pay it back. The plan solidified, formal demand letters for restitution and resignation, or we'd go straight to the DA and sue. But the real weapon was public exposure. Her entire operation depends on ignorance, Martinez said, packing our evidence into a battle-worn briefcase. Once the neighborhood sees the numbers, she's done. Walking to my car, sunlight warm on my face for the first time in weeks, I realized we'd flipped the board completely. Brenda thought she was swatting at some petty complainer. Instead, she'd been building the prosecution's case for months. Tuesday evening, I sat at my kitchen table with a yellow legal pad, mapping the battle plan like a general before D-Day. The smell of Elena's lasagna drifted from the oven, mixing with the sharp scent of fresh printer ink, as I sorted 3 years of financial evidence into neat stacks, each one another nail in Brenda's coffin. Strategy demanded the right people in the right places. First, Tom Martinez, my retired accountant neighbor. "I've been waiting for someone to take her down," he said when I explained, "Send me the records. I'll make a presentation even my 90-year-old mother could understand." 40 years at the IRS meant he could turn fraud into kindergarten math. Elena brought her ICU-level organization skills, building a color-coded timeline that linked Brenda's harassment to the fake invoices. "In nursing, we call it pattern recognition," she said, highlighting dates with a squeaky yellow marker. "Once you see it, you can't unsee it." By Wednesday, we had our first media ally, Sarah Chen, the local reporter known for tearing into municipal corruption. She arrived with a tape recorder and the hungry look of a bloodhound catching a fresh scent. "HOA scandals are blowing up everywhere," she said. "Readers love David vs. Goliath, especially with money this dirty." Sarah dug deeper, finding Kensington Gardens had no license, no insurance, no employees. Just Brenda's husband, Frank. Bank records showed HOA checks deposited straight into their account, with no expenses for equipment, materials, or payroll. It was pure money laundering, thinly disguised as community care. Thursday evening brought Detective Jim Walsh from 3 streets over. Off-duty, iced tea in hand, he reviewed our harassment timeline. "False reports are usually misdemeanors," he said, "but when they're meant to silence witnesses in a financial crime, that's felony territory. Elena wasn't just being harassed. She was being targeted to keep Brenda's scam quiet." The week turned into a war room. Martinez drafted a cease and desist that read like a guillotine order. We prepared complaints for the Attorney General, County Prosecutor, and State Insurance Commission. Each document was another layer of armor against whatever Brenda might try. Then Friday, Tom burst in, laptop under his arm, grinning like he'd cracked a cold case. His analysis showed Brenda's theft was timed to dodge automatic audits. Biggest hauls right after dues or special assessments came in, with emergencies costing exactly what was in the bank. "This is no accident," Tom said. "She's been gaming the system like a card counter." Elena suggested we personally invite every household to the next HOA meeting. "She'll try to keep them away," she warned, recalling hospital politics. "But if we ask directly, curiosity will fill that room." Saturday, we went door-to-door with copies of the most damning evidence and Tom's simplified breakdown. The reaction exceeded anything we'd imagined. Mrs. Patterson ushers us inside for coffee that tastes like sweet vindication and shares that last year Brenda fined her $200 for excessive garden decor, specifically 3 ceramic frogs her grandchildren gave her for Mother's Day. The Johnsons display a citation for their teenagers' basketball hoop being improperly visible from the street, as though kids shooting hoops were some existential threat to property values. By Sunday evening, we've locked in attendance from 28 out of 31 households. Tom has assembled a PowerPoint that could make corporate boardrooms jealous. Sarah Chen has a photographer lined up to document everything. Detective Walsh will show up off duty but wearing his badge, a subtle signal that real crimes have consequences beyond HOA politics. In our kitchen, surrounded by evidence, allies, and a plan more airtight than a bank vault, I realize we're building something greater than retaliation. We're assembling a movement. Monday morning delivers the first sign. Brenda senses the walls closing in. Elena spots a business card wedged under our windshield wiper, a bargain. Been lawyer from 2 towns over, specializing in HOA defense. The card, printed in faded ink on paper that looks like it survived the 90s, reeks faintly of desperation and stale cigarette smoke. Likely a preed, on delivery by Frank Kensington in some cut-rate spy move. But Brenda's true panic shows Tuesday when Tom calls, chuckling like he's just watched a clown face plant into a wedding cake. She tried to hire his old accounting firm to defend her, requesting they review irregularities in HOA finances and help fend off harassment from residents. The partners, after glancing at the evidence Tom had already supplied, politely declined and recommended she find a criminal defense attorney who takes payment plans. By Wednesday night, the situation escalates to outright vandalism. Elena comes home from her hospital shift to find our mailbox not just damaged, but obliterated. Metal shards strewn across the lawn like shrapnel. Across our garage door, "Liar" is spray, painted in blood. Red letters that drip down the white surface like accusations staining snow. Our security cameras capture the whole scene with wildlife, documentary clarity. The hooded figure's stance and walk match Brenda exactly. Worse, she uses our driveway to turn around, revealing part of her license plate. Elena immediately matches it to Brenda's silver sedan. Detective Walsh reviews the footage, shaking his head like a man watching a live confession. Destroying a mailbox, he reminds us, is a federal crime. He adds vandalism, trespassing, and witness intimidation to her growing rap sheet. Scared criminals make stupid choices, his sergeant used to say. Brenda is proving it in real time. Thursday, she tries psychological warfare dressed up as community outreach, slipping flyers into every mailbox accusing certain residents of plotting to ruin the neighborhood with lies and frivolous lawsuits, printed on the same pricey cream stock she uses for official HOA mailings. The letter warns of troublemakers who want to erase community standards and invite chaos. Reading it feels like watching someone dig their own grave with a gold-plated shovel. The blowback is instant. Mrs. Patterson calls it the silliest thing she's read since her grandson insisted pro wrestling was real. The Johnsons tape their copy to their front window, adding a note, "We support Marcus and Elena." By Friday, over half the neighborhood has openly mocked Brenda's propaganda, with several marching their flyers straight to our front door. But she's not done. Friday brings her lowest blow yet. An anonymous call to Elena's workplace claiming she's mentally unfit due to neighborhood stress and should be monitored around children. The caller lists Elena's exact schedule and suggests the hospital keep watch over her with pediatric patients, using kids' safety as a weapon against a pediatric ICU nurse crosses lines most people don't even imagine. Elena's boss, Dr. Rachel Morrison, calls immediately, her voice trembling with fury. She's documenting the harassment and alerting hospital security. Elena has been with her 3 years, saving premature babies, handling crises, and now someone's trying to weaponize that trust. Saturday morning, I find Frank parked outside Elena's hospital, snapping photos of her license plate and scribbling notes like a discount private eye. When Elena confronts him, he claims he's protecting the community from unstable people. Security escorts him off the property, but not before he mutters threats about consequences for those who don't know their place. The backlash to these antics is enormous. Tom starts a neighborhood group chat that balloons to 26 households, each sharing their own Brenda horror stories and pledging to stand with us. Sarah Chen interviews residents for her article, gathering quotes like, "It's about time someone stood up to her." Sunday night, Elena sits at the kitchen table, not with patient charts, but her own medical records documenting stress-induced health problems, chronic headaches, insomnia, anxiety, elevated blood pressure, and 8 pounds lost. This isn't just harassment, she says in her steady clinical voice. It's physical harm. Watching Brenda's fear spiral into crimes, we know tomorrow is the showdown. Monday night arrives crisp and cold, but the community center parking lot is already packed by 6:30 p.m. Neighbors clutch Brenda's flyers like absurd souvenirs. The scent of coffee drifts through the air as Tom readies his laptop, projector screen glowing like a blank canvas waiting for justice. Brenda makes a grand entrance at 7:15, striding in with Frank and two visibly uneasy allies, Dorothy Pratt and Bill Morrison. Her heels click like a countdown to 0. Inside, it's the biggest HOA turnout ever, 28 households. Sarah is in place with her camera. Detective Walsh sits in the back, his badge catching the light like a promise. Brenda tries to seize the floor. Before we begin, I want to address the malicious rumors. But Tom interrupts calmly, citing bylaws that require financial reports first. The crowd murmurs in agreement as he steps forward with a file thick enough to choke a horse. On screen, $47,000 in payments to Kensington Gardens LLC, each red, highlighted entry like a smoking gun. The room goes silent except for the hum of the projector. She's been stealing from us for years, Jim Patterson mutters, earning an elbow from his wife, who nonetheless nods grimly. Brenda's protests hit a shrill pitch, but Detective Walsh stands, his badge glinting. When financial irregularities suggest criminal activity, these documents become evidence. He says evenly, "Ma'am, I suggest you remain silent until you get a real lawyer." Then Elena stands. She lays out the harassment step by step. The false reports, the career sabotage, the stalking at her hospital. Each detail is a hammer blow. She even called my hospital claiming I was mentally unstable. Elena says, her voice unwavering. The irony, targeting someone who saves children daily, hangs in the air like smoke. The votes come fast. Remove Brenda as President 27-3. Demand full restitution nearly unanimous. Ban Kensington Gardens LLC forever cheers. As Brenda storms out, heels snapping on the tile, Tom delivers the parting shot with surgical precision. "Oh, and Brenda, your lien paperwork will be served tomorrow morning. You might want to start packing." The door slammed behind her with the kind of finality reserved for justice served ice cold. By the next morning, the air was crisp and clear, as if the world itself approved of what was coming. I wasn't even halfway through my coffee when there was a sharp, rapid pounding at our front door. Through the glass, I spotted Brenda marching up the walkway like she was storming Omaha Beach, clutching a manila envelope to her chest as though it were a shield. Her face wore that grim determination of someone convinced they were about to land the knockout blow. "Marcus," she shouted, her voice teetering between hysteria and false authority. "I have legal papers that will end this harassment campaign once and for all." The frost on the lawn caught the morning sun as neighbors began stepping outside, drawn to the scene like spectators to the most riveting train wreck in town. I opened the door with a smile that was probably a shade too self-assured. Elena appeared beside me, fresh off her night shift at the hospital, still in scrubs scented faintly of antiseptic. "And Victory? Good morning, Brenda," I said lightly, watching her complexion cycle through reds that would shame a tomato. "What brings you here so early?" "I'm filing an injunction to stop your defamatory harassment campaign," she declared, waving the envelope like a battle flag. "That meeting last night was nothing more than a coordinated smear job, lies, fake evidence, designed to ruin my reputation." Her voice rang out across the street, prompting Mrs. Patterson to peek from behind her ceramic frog collection and Tom Martinez to wander out of his garage with coffee, settling in for the show. "That's interesting," I said, glancing over my shoulder. "Honey, could you bring those papers we've been meaning to deliver?" Elena ducked inside and returned with a thick legal envelope radiating official weight. I took it from her, the autumn breeze carrying the scent of fallen leaves and justice. "Brenda Kensington," I announced loud enough for the growing crowd, "you're being served." The envelope landed in her hands with the ceremony of an award presentation. Though this particular prize came with a $50,000 bill, and the possibility of criminal charges. Brenda's expression twisted as she tore it open, her hands trembling like dry leaves in the wind. What is this?" she stammered, her voice stripped of its usual command, deflating like a punctured tire. "Property lien for fraudulent financial transfers," Elena explained with the calm precision of a nurse delivering difficult news, "and criminal referrals for theft, harassment, and filing false police reports." She paused to let the words sink in. "You always said some people think the rules don't apply to them." The irony hung thick in the air. For years Brenda had prowled the neighborhood with clipboards and citations. Now she held papers that could cost her everything she'd stolen, plus interest. The hunter had become the hunted, and the neighborhood had front-row seats. Just then, a patrol car pulled into our driveway, followed by Sarah Chen's Honda, press credentials visible through her windshield. Detective Walsh stepped out, wearing the satisfied look of a man who finally got to arrest the neighborhood's troublemaker instead of responding to her bogus calls. "Mrs. Kensington," he said, his voice carrying across the crowd, "you're under arrest for filing false police reports, criminal harassment, and destruction of federal property." The handcuffs flashed in the sunlight like jewelry for the guilty. As Walsh read Brenda her rights she'd tried to deny others, Sarah's camera captured every second. The crowd began applauding, led by Tom Martinez, until the sound filled the street. "This is harassment," Brenda screeched as Walsh guided her to the patrol car. "I'll sue every one of you, ma'am," Walsh interrupted gently. "You have the right to remain silent. I recommend you use it." The door shut with the satisfying click of a story ending exactly as it should, muffling her protests behind government steel and glass. As the car pulled away with the former HOA president on her way to face justice, I turned to the neighbors. "This is what happens when communities work together." Elena's hand slid into mine, her voice steady and warm. "Bullies only win when good people stay silent." 6 months later, I was in our backyard watching Elena run the first annual Community Accountability Day. The transformation was staggering. Barbecue smoke mingled with children's laughter. Neighbors sat shoulder to shoulder at picnic tables, swapping recipes and stories. The legal resolution had come quickly after the evidence went public. Brenda had pled guilty to reduced charges, paying $47,000 in restitution plus fees and penalties that pushed the total beyond $65,000. Her house sold within 30 days, the "for sale" sign standing as a monument to the cost of arrogance. Frank shut down Kensington Gardens LLC and took a job 2 counties away. Elena received both a formal apology from her hospital administration and a commendation for professional excellence under extraordinary stress. She was nominated for the State Nursing Association's Community Service Award. From the recovered HOA funds, $15,000 established the Elena Martinez Nursing Scholarship, and $20,000 built a playground accessible to children with disabilities. Tom Martinez, elected HOA president unanimously, instituted monthly financial reports with full transparency. "Trust but verify," he declared. Sarah Chen's reporting won the state's Public Service Award and led to legislation requiring annual audits for HOAs, nicknamed the Brenda Prevention Act. Attorney Martinez now specialized in HOA corruption cases, charging premium rates for the Kensington treatment. Elena's health improved dramatically once the harassment ended, and property values rose 12% in half a year. Young families began moving in, drawn by stories of a community that stood up for its members. That evening, as the sun set over children playing on swings paid for with recovered funds, Walsh stopped by out of uniform. "Best arrest I ever made," he told Elena, accepting a plate of potato salad. "Usually we arrest people who hurt communities. This time I arrested the community's biggest problem." As neighbors packed up their things, Elena squeezed my hand. "You know the best part?" she asked. "What's that?" She was right about one thing. Some people really do think the rules don't apply to them. She just never realized she was one of them. Walking past our rebuilt mailbox, I couldn't help smiling at the irony. Brenda's years of control, freak enforcement, had accidentally built something far better. A real community based on respect, transparency, and safety. So I'll ask you, what would you do if your HOA had a Karen, trying to run you out? Share your stories in the comments. And if you liked seeing justice win over petty tyranny, subscribe to HOA Stories. Remember, bullies win only when good people stay silent.